Hey Bookworms of Concord, I just finished Oathbringer, Book 3 of the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I'm just going to jump right into it because there's a lot I want to say. The strongest aspect of this book, I'd say, is the character development, no matter how major or minor the character. I really appreciated Shallan's character development, who's my favorite character, because it's not this continuous rise to something great. Instead, she goes up and down trying to discover who she is, which is something I relate to. When we first met her in The Way of Kings, she thought she knew who she was, but after her experience in Words of Radiance, she's not so sure anymore, and she struggles to discover her true identity throughout the majority of Oathbringer. This, I think, is a more realistic character development than a continuous steady rise to the zenith with hardly any hurdles along the way, especially for such a long series where every book is over 1,000 pages. And Shallan isn't the only one this happens to which just gives her even more points to Sanderson's expert character development skill. But I think what I like most about Oathbringer, and all of them in general so far, is how realistic Sanderson portrays depression, particularly in Kaladin. His newfound freedom from slavery in the first book wasn't a silver bullet to his depression, which I think is a mistake the average author would make. Rather, he continues to struggle with it, specifically with his purpose in life and his inability to cope with failure. Despite all he's accomplished, he sees himself as a failure and someone who will always be alone. What I find most realistic about his depression is that he's not properly dealing with it. Rather than facing his problems, he keeps white-knuckling through it. So white-knuckling means enduring a difficult or stressful situation with sheer willpower, often without addressing the underlying issues. It implies a tense, unsustainable effort like gripping something tightly with clenched fists, hence the white knuckle term. This term is usually used in the context of addiction recovery, but it can also apply to mental health problems like depression. Instead of dealing with his underlying issues like his grief over Tien and his failures to protecting those in his care, Kaladin uses a new purpose or mission to continue bottling up what he's feeling instead of dealing with it. Eventually, that bottled pressure will become too much that it will explode catastrophically. This term, white knuckling, applies to another character, but I won't say who or why. And this, I think, is the most accurate representation of depression I've ever read in a book. Because of the fictional setting of this world, Roshar, or the Cosmere, professional help through therapy and or medication isn't something Kaladin can seek, so instead what he needs is not only to face his problem head on like he does all the time in battle, but also to seek help from those who care about him, like Syl, Shallan, Adolin, Dalinar, and the men of Bridge 4. The support and help from those who love you can be just as therapeutic as that of a mental health professional. And this is why I love books. I was diagnosed not too long, about a year and a half ago, with major depressive disorder, which is a comorbid condition with my autism. And I also suffer with a feeling of purpose and often think I'm a failure. So it's just incredibly relieving when a really good author is able to paint your struggles in a single character, like that character is a mirror image of you. It makes you feel seen and understood. And books of every genre, even horror, get us to ask difficult questions we wouldn't otherwise ask. Books engage the imagination more deeply than movies by requiring readers to visualize scenes, interpret subtext, and process internal dialogues that you just don't get in movies. This introspective engagement allows for nuanced explorations of complex ideas and encourages deep reflection. Unlike movies, which present a fixed visual and auditory experience, books leave space for personal interpretation, making difficult questions feel more personal and thought-provoking. So when reading about a character like Kaladin with depression, the internal dialogue and detailed emotional depth allow for a more personal connection. Unlike movies, which show external expressions of depression, books immerse readers in the character's thoughts, making our struggles feel more relatable. As I said, this helps us feel seen, understood, and less alone in our own experiences. So that's a lot of positives, well-deserved, but if I were to give a single complaint, it'd be that the pacing of Oathbringer during part 3 does slow down a little bit, but the payoff is absolutely worth it in that third part. I mean, a book that's over 1,200 pages is bound to slow down in pacing at some point, so I can't really have this affect my rating. It'd just be unfair in my opinion. Otherwise, whereas Words of Radiance was my favorite in the series, now Oathbringer, this chonker of a book, has taken its place. Especially because part 5, the last section of the book, was just a relentless Sanderson that was unfathomably phenomenal. And just, I'm still recovering from it. Finally, the last thing I guess I'll say that I really appreciate, not just about Oathbringer, but also the Stormlight archive in general, is that no matter how much more powerful the characters with their magical abilities get, they still have limitations and don't become ridiculously overpowered, which is proof that Sanderson's hard magic system is just absolutely exceptional. So yeah, new favorite of the Stormlight archive. I know a lot of people have Words of Radiance as their most favorite, and I think there are fewer who say Oathbringer is their favorite over Words of Radiance, and I can see why. I enjoy this much more, even though it took me a little longer to read it. It took me 13 days to read this book. Words of Radiance took me, I don't know, about a week. I can't remember. Anyway, on to the next one after taking a very short break with reading shorter novels so I don't overwhelm myself. So yes, that's it. Okay, bye.